Yo, we're back with another 2025 NBA mock draft, our second official mock of this cycle. We're about 4 months away from the NBA draft and just under 1 month till March Madness. We're going to be hitting the gas on draft content from here on out, so here's Mock Draft 2.0. At number 1, we have a massively easy pick, with the New Orleans Pelicans jumping up one spot to nab Duke forward Cooper Flagg, who's come on as the outright top prospect in this draft. For a time, it seemed like Dylan Harper could make a run at number 1, but that was prior to a 12-game stretch from Flagg of 23, 6, 4, and 3 stocks per game on 55, 58, 86 splits. Simply put, he's been dominant, and there will be no dethroning the Blue Devil as this year's top pick. The Pelicans could use guard depth, but there would be no turning down Flagg as a two-way star, especially given his potential ability to protect the rim alongside Zion Williamson. For New Orleans, this would very much be taking the best prospect we've seen since Victor Wembanyama and figuring it out down the line. In this mock, the Raptors are likely the biggest winner, jumping 3 spots over Utah and Washington to land the coveted number 2 pick, making an easy decision in grabbing Rutgers' Dylan Harper. Any other year, the 6'6 combo guard would be an extremely worthy number 1 pick, exhibiting tons of on-ball skill, elite paint pressure and rim finishing, and shooting potential. And all that's backed up by his 19 points, 4.7 assists, and 4 rebounds per game on good splits. This is an absolute no-brainer for the Raptors, who are somewhat sitting between rebuild and win now after a deadline addition of Brandon Ingram. Despite that, their best guard is Emmanuel Quickley, who's good but probably not the same caliber that Harper can eventually become. Harper would be granted the point guard reins with talented guys like Ingram, former All-Star Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, and Grady Dick surrounding him. Truthfully, that's a pretty fun core to work with for the next few years if Harper pans into a star. Third, we have a pick that we've made before and will probably continue to make, but it's tough to find a way around it given Ace Bailey's sky-high ceiling and the Hornets' continued need for talent. At 6'9", Bailey's been as advertised as a wing scorer, pouring on just under 19 points on 47% shooting overall, and he's shown some motor too with over 7 rebounds and 2 stocks per game. As you'll see in the coming months, I'm fairly skeptical on his passing, general decision making, and in turn his ceiling, but there is no denying he has some of the highest upside in a prospect in some time with his pure shot making. The Hornets could use a talented shot maker next to LaMelo Ball, and there's worse things than doubling up on some of what both he and Brandon Miller offer. Bailey's panning out would make life easier on the entire Hornets core and expedite their rebuild. Full transparency, I would be dangerously close to moving on from Ball if I were Charlotte, but am not opposed to giving it a little more time and drafting a prospect this year based on this core. Fourth overall, we have a player who's probably done more for his stock than any other over the past month, Baylor hybrid VJ Edgecombe, being selected by the Utah Jazz. Edgecombe saw a slow offensive start to the year, but has bolstered his splits tremendously in recent weeks, scoring more efficiently at the rim, shooting better, and converting at the charity stripe. He's effectively turned into what many thought he could be prior to the season on offense, a tweener guard-forward hybrid with functional athleticism and prowess on both sides of the ball. The Jazz need a lot of stuff, but mostly just talent, and Edgecombe offers that in bunches with what I believe is a pretty high floor skill set with athleticism, a scoring punch, and stingy defense. I don't think it's out of the question he becomes a legitimate ball handler, but I think he'll be an impactful player regardless. I think any number of teams could bet on Edgecombe this July. At 5, we have a match made in heaven with jumbo point guard Kasparas Jakučionis landing in Washington's growing core. The Illinois product has gone for 15, 5, and 5 this season, showing bukus of skill in the pick and roll, finishing around the rim, and more. His outside splits have taken a hit recently, and his defense leaves plenty to be desired, but he's a pretty gnarly lead guard prospect regardless. The Wizards' young core somewhat feels like it's waiting to be connected by a player like this. Alex Sarr in the front court, Bilal Coulibaly as a talented two-way wing, other rookies like Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George, and more. It feels like they could all benefit from a true lead guard that can develop with the ball in hand. I'm personally enjoying the Wizards' rebuild so far, but they do feel several pieces away from truly getting back to competing, so there's no real need to rush this pick. They can continue to sit back, be patient, and swing for the fences. At number 6, the Philadelphia 76ers first conveys at the lowest possible spot, and here we have them taking a well-rounded forward prospect in Georgia's Asa Newell. As I said in my last video, this is a bit rich for Newell, but the 76ers just don't necessarily have the need or opportunity for these massive swing picks near the top of this draft, and Newell does fill a front court need. The 6'11" forward has offered rock solid consistency so far this year for the Bulldogs, nabbing 15 points, nearly 7 rebounds, an assist, and over 1 block and steal apiece. He shot 56% overall and has improved in shooting the ball all season long. Philadelphia should theoretically be good. They have a superstar center in Embiid, a star guard in Tyrese Maxey, a talented but seemingly fading wing in Paul George, and they drafted a nice combo guard last year in Jared McCain. There's no real piece to the puzzle that will solve things for Philly in this draft, but Newell could at least add some front court consistency alongside or in reserve of their superstar in Embiid. At 7, we have the Brooklyn Nets, who seem to be doing a bit of a half rebuild in not selling as much as they should have at the trade deadline, while also asserting that they want to land a star in the coming years, presumably luring Giannis Antetokounmpo in. I think that's far from the correct decision, but with that in mind, I've looked at players here that I think could quickly get up to speed in the NBA while offering a moderately high ceiling, and I think Texas sharpshooter Trey Johnson offers just that. At 6'6", he scored over 20 points per game on 44% shooting as a true freshman in the toughest conference in basketball. His shooting has been elite, his inside scoring has improved, and he's added slightly more in the ways of passing and defense than most pure scorers. Johnson, of course, has some overlap with current net Cam Thomas, a talented scorer in his own right, but adding the Longhorn gives Brooklyn some flexibility in exploring other pathways to upgrade their roster, and I think Johnson long-term is just a bit more versatile as that 2-guard of the team's future. At number 8, we have the ever-middling Chicago Bulls swinging on Duke center Kamon Malawach, a 7-footer with plenty to offer. The Bulls finally seem to be pressing the rebuild button, letting DeRozan walk and shipping off Caruso last offseason, and finally ridding themselves of the Levine contract at the deadline. Now they're tasked with adding talent with a pick that isn't likely to land in the top 5. With that in mind, we've added their center of the future in Malawach here at 8. They've long used the offensive-minded Nikola Vucevic, and Malawach would be very much a diversion from that path, with a raw offensive game but great length and defensive acumen. He's shooting 74% overall, alluding to some real potential as a play finisher in the NBA, and has the pure length and shot block timing to mess things up on defense. This is by no means a star ad for Chicago, but they would at least add a piece to their small core that should be in it for the long haul in their center. At 9, we have the Portland Trail Blazers gambling on our third and final Duke Blue Devil, Con Knippel. Realistically, there's little chance I personally end up with Knippel this high, but there's no denying he's a pretty solid fit for a Trailblazers squad that desperately needs his concoction of skills. As a 6'7" freshman, he's poured on 13 points on 45% shooting, connecting on 38% of his nearly 6 threes attempted per game. Even better, he's boasting a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. Portland could already benefit from his positional size and elite shooting, but his ability to function as a pick-and-roll passer as a wing is special, and could really help the Trailblazers, who have a little bit of an identity crisis with guards right now. This probably isn't the flash Portland wants to leave with in 2025, but would certainly be a positive. Rounding out the top 10 is South Carolina forward Colin Murray Boyles, one of the more unique prospects in general, being selected by the up-and-coming San Antonio Spurs. Murray Boyles is a wing-sized forward and an impactful one at that, leading the charge for South Carolina with 15.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.5 blocks and steals apiece, and 57% shooting. He's an essential non-shooter and undersized to play the 4, likely what he'll be in the NBA, but he's so highly efficient around the rim and such a versatile defender, it more than makes up for his shortcomings. With the Spurs, future face of the league Victor Wembanyama covers CMB's lack of perimeter prowess and size deficit perfectly. With this pick, San Antonio could be adding a highly unique front court pairing alongside Wemby for the foreseeable future. Our first late lottery pick is Jeremiah Fears of Oklahoma, the youngest player in the class and a point guard with star upside despite some concerns. The highlights with Fears are his 15.5 points per game on okay splits with 1.7 steals in the best conference in college ball. He's not undersized at around 6'4" and has real athletic tools like speed, shiftiness, body control, and more that make his NBA future brighter. Lowlights are a literal 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio at 3.7, just 28% three-point shooting, and some meh decision-making and shot selection overall. The Miami Heat are an interesting late lotto team, owning 2 picks and a swath of win now but not exceptional players. For my money, if I were in their position, I would gamble on a potential star, and I think Fears is just that. In Miami, he could blossom into an offensive weapon at the 1 with talents like Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, Andrew Wiggins, and Khalil Ware flanking. At 12th overall, we have the Houston Rockets, who really have no business being here, seeing as they're already good and have one of the best young cores in the NBA, but they're picking with Phoenix's pick and grabbing UConn's Liam McNeely. While I still very much believe in Reed Sheppard, the Rockets gambled on a shooter last year and it hasn't panned out so far, and they still very much need that, so the drafting of McNeely is largely centered around it. He scored 15 points per game with 6.6 rebounds and 2.3 assists for the Huskies, shooting 42% overall and 37% from 3 on over 5 attempts as a true freshman. There's no guarantee he could immediately fill in the gaps in Houston, but long term he'd be a great ancillary offensive piece with perimeter shooting, some nice passing, among other skills. At 13, we have the Atlanta Hawks adding who is quickly becoming my favorite prospect in this class, Maryland's Derek Queen. Queen stands at an undersized 6'10", but falls into that high-feel center category with great scoring instincts, passing acumen, and more. He's added 16 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, and more for the best Maryland team we've seen in some time. The Hawks seem to be hitting refresh around Trae Young, so they've really got some flexibility in this draft. I love Queen here. He's such a fun and versatile front court piece, a guy that could share a pretty unique and symbiotic relationship with Trae, who's an obviously elite passer and shooter. And the same with the budding Zachary Riza-Shea. If the Hawks were to full send a rebuild in the coming years, there's worse players to have rostered than a guy like Derek Queen. And rounding out the video is the Miami Heat using their second lottery pick. With them already having gambled on a polarizing pick in Fears, I like a higher floor pick at number 14, so I went with St. Joe's Rasheer Fleming. Fleming has come on as a draft hopeful this year with 15 points, 9 rebounds, and nearly 3 stocks per game, continuing to finish efficiently at the rim and drastically raising his 3-point shooting to 43%. The kicker, Fleming stands at 6'9" and has a reported 7'5" wingspan, just elite physical tools. The Miami Heat have done such a good job in recent years of getting production out of their mid-first selections, and Fleming just tangibly feels to me like one of those players who could fall to them and then add to a play next to stars on the wing for the next 15 years.